stupid computer to charge. That's the reason why I'm late, actually. It wouldn't charge earlier, and it's actually pretty low battery, so. I mean, not low, not terribly low, but could be better. Give me a sec, I'm sorry. It seems like every stream I do, I'm always unprepared. Uh, so, this is the Porcupine Zone, your source for unfiltered, controversial topics from a libertarian perspective. I'm your host, Vlad, and today we have actually quite a bit to talk about. The main thing, of course, being the fact that the House passed an extension for FISA. There's also, I'm going to be talking more about surveillance, how the state weaponized that against citizens, and we're going to be talking about the DHS, because that was also funded. So a lot of government funding are going around here. And yeah, let's jump into things. This is the first stream in which I'm doing a new schedule. I am now doing Mondays and Fridays from 6 to 8. With advice from my friend Libertarian Goth. She helped advise me on like how to do this, how to approach this more effectively. And as you can see, I'm already failing. Judging from the fact that I'm already 2 minutes late to the stream. I'll try to work on that though. So, jumping into things. Yesterday, Congress passed a 45-day extension of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, better known as FISA, after a bunch of negotiations. I think that lasted like a couple months. I'm not sure exactly how long. I know they argued. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he is blamed a lot. There's a lot of names thrown about. There's a lot of arguing between like Republicans and Democrats. Same old bullcrap for the government, which you can expect from a bureaucratic state. I think there was a previous 10-day extension they discussed. Then they like threw it out or something like that. But all you know is there was a 45-day extension, FISA, and this is short term. But as we all know, with the government, nothing is short term. The short term turns into the long term, as you can see at the Patriot Act and now FISA. They'll say that that's just an extension. We're gonna figure something out. They'll either negotiate a bill that further increases the surveillance, or they will just indefinitely extend this. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Maybe not. Maybe we'll get surprised, but don't get your hopes up. I'm not getting my hopes up. This administration seems to not be doing a good job with sticking with, protecting civil liberties and protecting civil rights. I mean, that's what you can expect from, Republicans and Democrats too. I'm not leaving anyone out. Just saying, don't trust the politicians. The shutdowns, that's also an example of the short term turning to long term. I think before, I can't really remember like any shutdowns going longer than there have been under Trump. Trump, as we all know, he had the longest shutdown previously at this first term. I think that was because of the wall. They're trying to fund the wall. The Democrats didn't want to get that passed. I liked Trump term 1. Trump term 2 is just not good right now. It shut down last year. That impacted me because I was working at a federal job. Don't blame me. I was kind of roped into it, but I'm out of it now. So it doesn't really affect me anymore. But yeah, last year does that. There was the layoffs. So there's a bunch of chaos going on with the departments and the agencies. With like Doge and stuff like that. It was kind of funny seeing everyone running around in a panic with their heads on a swivel. Because Doge is out, like, they had, like, the axe, or, like, just axe different departments and stuff like that. U.S. Aid was axed. I think the DOE was axed, too. Like, they tried to get rid of the Department of Education. Unfortunately, the cuts didn't last. But it was funny seeing Doge going against everybody, and yeah, like, both Republicans and Democrats joining together, like, I don't like this. No. We want to keep increasing funding to the different departments and stuff. No, we don't like Doge actually trying to make an effort in curbing the bureaucracy and curbing the government bloating. That's our job, right? That's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. It's pretty much all you can rely on the government to do nowadays. Just extend reckless spending. So why is there a bunch of hate around FISA? You've probably, if you probably stepped foot on political Twitter or political internet, anything like that, most definitely Reddit, you have probably seen a bunch of people arguing about FISA and why it's bad. The reason is because this is actually direct assault on our Fourth Amendment rights. And while it's supposed to target only foreigners, of course, American citizens are wrapped up in the crosshairs. We're caught in the crossfire. You may, you'll put a bunch of people at risk for getting that one bad guy over there. That one bad guy, he might not even be a bad guy. Screw everybody else. Let's get this guy. Might as well collect data on everybody else too he's contacting. Right? I mean. So it still sweeps up emails, texts, and phone calls from Americans that they are communicating with. And obviously, innocent Americans are getting involved in collateral damage. That's what I call it, collateral damage, in order to get to the bad guys. So it's basically, I guess, needs of the few outweigh the lives of the many. Or the lives of the few outweigh the lives of the many. I can't remember exactly how that saying goes. I just see it as you drop a bomb on like a bunch of people in order to kill the bad guy, but if people get hurt. That's kind of what this is. It's not exactly, no one's getting hurt or killed by this, but, privacy is getting hurt. Privacy is getting breached. Data is getting stolen. Your text to your mom or whatever, that's getting accessed by the government. Do you want that? Do you want the government seeing who you're talking with? It's like no encryption whatsoever. They can just have access to your phone. So once the data is in the system that the government, on a government-run server, the FBI and NSA can perform a backroom search on Americans without warrant. Do I need to explain why that's bad? Because I think I do. Backroom searches, they go against the norm. They are sneaky. They go behind everyone's back. And they only serve one purpose. To get your information so the government can decide if you're a threat or not. That's what I define it as. Warrants are obviously needed. This is defined by like the American Revolution. I think British officers like arrested people without warrants. So that's the reason why the Fourth Amendment exists. But it seems like the government no longer cares about that. It seems like the government is turning into the British Empire. The very people we revolted against. I brought this up in the previous stream. How eerily similar our society is turning into the crown. Our government is passing laws, passing bills that bypass constitutional rights and protections that you have as a citizen of this country. And they're using it against you. They're weaponizing the Constitution against you. They're saying they're protecting your rights, but they're not. These bills completely go against the Constitution, and I think the Founding Fathers, if they were alive today, would be horrified, mortified at what the government's doing. This is evil behavior. It's disgusting, but since it's coming from Uncle Sam, can we really be surprised? Coming from a country that initiated a bunch of coups against different nations back in the Cold War era because they might have been allied with the Soviet Union. And, of course, we're that country whose president might have gone assassinated by the CIA. Yeah, I'm talking about you, JFK. The most open-minded president we had. Wink, wink. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. A refresher, the Fourth Amendment requires the government to have probable cause and to obtain a warrant from a judge before looking at Americans' private data. Let me say that again because I completely butchered that. I have notes open right now, and I still can't read them correctly. That's how stupid I am, okay? And I'm an author, so I'm allowed to call myself stupid. So let's do that again, okay? Let's do that again together. Refresher. I'm just reading the notes now. I can't trust myself to say anything without the notes. The Fourth Amendment requires the government to have probable cause and to obtain a warrant from a judge before looking at an American's private data. Pat on the back, I said it right that time. Yay. So I explained a little bit of that before. Most people are aware of like the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. First Amendment protects free speech. Second Amendment protects gun rights. Fourth Amendment protects your rights to have a warrant issued by a judge. You know that police need to do this, but hey, the government needs to do this too. And they're sending agents after you. They have to have a warrant too. They can't just barge into your home. Supposedly, they can't barge into your home and search your stuff. But again, it's the government. So FISA established the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISC, which, unlike a standard legal court, operates in near total secrecy. In ex parte, that's Latin, meaning only the government's lawyers are there, with no defense to challenge the government's claims. And this is basically a rubber stamp on a free society, and it grants the government blanket approvals for mass surveillance, etc. We had a viewer, and I could already say that they left. So, yeah, I guess just rambling on about the FISC isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I needed to get into legal terms. So we take off my glasses. There, this is normal. Zvolot. This is lawyers Zvolot. Scholars Zvolot. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But how are we any different from China's mass surveillance program with all of their CCTVs? You know what China's like. I actually have a politician running here in New Hampshire. Her name is Lily Tang Williams. She fled from China. She knows what it's like over there. They have like CCTVs everywhere you look. There's big towers, a bunch of cameras on them, and they look at everyone and they use like this advanced AI to see like what everyone's doing. Their criminal pass, their social security score. I mean, not social security. Their social credit score. It's scary living in there because China is a lot like the society that George Orwell, a very well-known author that I highly respect, he warned us against that type of society. Oceania, with the party, Ingsoc, 1984. If you don't know what I'm referencing, that's the book. You should read it. It's very important. And Animal Farm actually gets into this too, like the transition from a democracy to a dictatorship, like Napoleon the Pig. He just established a dictatorship because he had the horses and all those like acting as like the secret police. If you have a society living in fear, they're easy to control. And if you have a society living in hunger, they're also easy to control. And that's like the tactic North Korea uses. But China, they have a society that's constantly surveilled, constantly spied upon. Their data is always getting stolen. And they call it protecting the law, protecting their national security. You can see our government's trying to use the same tactics, the same terminology. I guess it's okay to steal your rights. I guess it's okay to spy on you if it means you're doing it to protect the national security, right? What a joke. What a joke. So FISA, I'm just gonna call it FISA now. I'm not gonna call it FISA. It was originally created in 1978 to catch foreign spies and terrorists, but times obviously change, and people in power grow paranoid, as is tradition. So it isn't too much to see that FISA could be used, it could be weaponized and turned against the people into a domestic mass surveillance program for law enforcement. Now, I am a fan of law enforcement. I support officers. I support police officers. I have been friends with police officers in the past. I understand the importance of protecting the law, of enforcing the law, but there's a fine line between protecting the law, enforcing it. I don't know why I keep saying protecting the law, enforcing the law, and just being totalitarian, being authoritarian, putting people in jail for crimes against the state. There's a fine line between, I guess you could say, legal practices and the stuff that Russia's doing right now, putting journalists people in jail because they're criticizing the state, they're criticizing the war in Ukraine. You can't even talk about the war in Ukraine and Russia right now. Yet they're referred to as a special military operation. Well, do get put in jail. We all knew about that back in 2022 when this whole war started. It's bad over there, but you need to remember, Russia was established as a system kind of similar to us. Obviously, they have a prime minister instead of a vice president, but still, they have a system of government similar to us. And we'll see what that's like now with Vladimir Putin in charge, with the United Russia Party in charge. The government became very corrupt, it became very bloated, and it became more obsessed with protecting itself than with protecting the people. And when the people are seen as a threat to the state, then action is taken by the state to put those people in their place, which is either putting them into the gulag, putting them into a prison, or just killing them. That's what the Soviet Union did. That's what North Korea does. That's what China does. That's what Iran does. That's what Cuba does. Do I need to list more authoritarian states? All of these different nations have that in common. They use their police, their military, to crack down on dissent. They use it to crack down on peaceful protests. So you have a bunch of leftists out there right now saying that we're living in a society where the president has more power than Congress. The president has more power than the Supreme Court. The president is a dictator. The president is a tyrant. But then you look at nations like Russia. Can you be allowed to call Putin a dictator? Hell no. If you call Putin a dictator, you will be put in the back of a black van and brought to a jail where you will be tossed into prison and you'll probably never see your family again. Because they'll probably assassinate you like they did with Alexei Navalny. That's a poor guy. He was a good guy. And Putin killed him because he spoke out. He is the main opposition. So when they say there's kings in this country, just ask yourself, is there really a king in this country? You're allowed to still protest. You're allowed to still say what you want to say online. Unlike the UK, where posting a meme about the government will get you a visit from the police. There's been memes of that. There's a meme of like this one woman in like a hijab and another woman with like a tattoo. They're both policewomen. They're visiting this individual in his home because he posted a meme criticizing the government. So that goes to show it can happen to civilized countries like the UK, who not long ago was one of the most dominant superpowers the world has ever seen. Actually, the world's largest superpower. They are the largest empire in history. They went from very respected to now being kind of condemned and criticized by much of the world. I have a bunch of friends living in the UK, so like I respect their country, I respect their people, but I don't really respect their government that much right now because it's using social media, it's using information and surveillance against the people to keep the people in check, prevent them from rising up. Keir Starmer promised to undo what the Conservatives did. Conservatives are too bloated, too corrupt. It seems that the Labours are worse. And that's why you have parties like Reform and especially Restore Britain, which I support. I support Restore Britain. You have those parties rising to power. But then parties like Reform are unfortunately becoming corrupt too. They are falling under basically the same governance that their parties are under. They don't want to do anything to protect their country. They call for an invasion from like the immigrants and stuff like that. And that's a topic for another video, obviously, in our stream, like the issue between legal immigration and illegal immigration, because there's a lot for that. But it goes beyond that. This weaponization of social media needs to stop. You're supposed to be civilized, dude. You're part of Western civilization. You're part of Europe. In Europe right now, They debated if they should ban X because they're terrified of Elon Musk restoring free speech to the platform. People are talking about how Elon is restricting free speech, but he's not. I've seen that X has become a lot more open since Elon took over. Under Jack Dorsey, it was very controlled, and there's a lot of people I follow on X now who were banned under Dorsey because they didn't say what the site wanted them to say. They said stuff that were critical of the government. They said stuff that was seen as extremist, and they were censored because of it. And people have been blacklisted, and people have been doxxed because of things they've said in the past. And that's something called cancel culture, where people are canceled because of what they say. So now that that's over, now that I got that little rant out of my system, it's time to talk more about FISA. So the FBI and the NSA have even used it to investigate Black Lives Matter and January 6th. Two very big moments in this nation's history. They happen back to back, it seems like. I think Black Lives Matter and all those protests, especially COVID ones, were kind of things that ruined Trump's first term in the first place. The reason why Biden was elected. And then January 6th is like kind of the last, I guess you could say, hurrah of the MAGA movement before Trump went bye-bye once and for all. But yeah, just listen to our viewer. But yeah, January 6th, that's hotly debated. But Black Lives Matter was basically a coordinated movement across the whole country. People rose to the streets, protested. Granted, all of those protests were riots, actually, but still, they were peaceful protests. But the FBI and the NSA, they're using FISA to investigate these people because they're seen as threats. They're seen as domestic threats. They could be seen as influenced by Russia. Russia is especially used in cases like this. They've been used as a scapegoat for 2016 for why Trump won. The reason why Trump won is really easy. Hillary Clinton wasn't a good candidate. Trump was obviously more popular. He's definitely more funny back then. He's kind of like the underdog, the shadow candidate who just rose to power all of a sudden. But people liked him. He had that populist attitude that Hillary didn't really have. She didn't have the same momentum that he had. Trump was just more popular. He had that appeal to people. He appealed to conservatives who were feeling that they were being subjected to oppression under the Obama administration and the Bush administration. Trump, he seemed back then like he would be going against the system. He'd be going against the swamp, the deep state. And I do feel like in his first term, I keep bringing this up, but like in his first term, he did seem like he was that kind of guy. He did seem to be investigating a lot of the corruption that we see that's not prevalent across the whole government. And he did give tax cuts, and he did seem to cut down some departments. Like he tried to do those Doge too, and then he's turning against it. I think he's been corrupted as well. He's been blackmailed. We'll see if that's true. I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm not sure who's to blame for that one. But it's true for everyone to see. The president right now is a puppet controlled by someone. You can't really see. I call them the shadow government. You can call them. It's scary, sketchy stuff. So using a national security tool for domestic policing it's a dangerous expansion of government power, obviously, and this turns everyone like you and me into a potential suspect in the state's eyes. And that again goes into the whole everyone's a threat kind of thing, where I guess the whole thing is like a big game of what's called guess or something like that. Spy. I can't remember exactly what the game is called. Maybe Among Us. Where someone's ejected, but everyone's under constant surveillance. And the FBI has even admitted to hundreds of thousands of non-compliant queries. So this is evidence that, the FBI can't be trusted, CIA can't be trusted, the NSA can't be trusted. So can we trust the government with our national security? Can they trust it with actually catching the bad guys? Because there's been evidence that the government did actually let 9/11 happen. Or they knew it was going to happen, but they didn't take action in time. So maybe it wasn't an inside job, but maybe it was a massive screw up on their part. I think there's more files of that coming. Hopefully soon. But I can't really expect much from the Justice Department right now. And remember, Edward Snowden, he tried to whistleblow against the government, and he is labeled as a traitor. So speaking out, labeling things, calling it out into the open, that gets you labeled as an outcast. You're seeing that with Nick Shirley right now. Nick Shirley has called out lots of corruption everywhere right now, lots of fraud. He ruined the career of Tim Walz, who 2 years ago was a vice presidential candidate. Tim Walz, if Kamala had won, he would have been your vice president. Think of that. The very governor of Minnesota is letting this corruption happen. And he's Nick Shirley a liar. But the evidence that Nick Shirley has uncovered is very true. And now California is trying to pass a law to ban people like Nick Shirley from entering the state. They're trying to ban investigative journalism. Isn't that what journalism is supposed to be? Investigative? So Tim Walz, I don't think is running for re-election anymore. He's probably not going to be running for office anytime soon. He's probably going to have to go hide under a rock because his image has been tarnished so much by everything surrounding Minnesota. He just handled everything so badly since Trump took office. Trump's a whole different person, but Tim Walz, the way he handled ICE, the way he handled the Leering Center, he's dug his own grave. He did this to himself. He shot himself in the foot. And I do shudder just thinking about what this country would be like under Kamala Harris. That's the thing. I despise Donald Trump right now as a president. I really dislike him. I don't think he's a very good president at all. In my opinion, his second term has been the worst probably in history of this nation. But I still do believe that Kamala Harris would have been a worse president. She didn't seem to have an agenda ready. She didn't seem to have any policies. And it seemed like whenever she was on stage, she would laugh like a harpy. She'd be like the Joker. Just laughing there, awkwardly, while Trump is just like, "You good, woman?" And she seemed drunk off her ass half the time. She wasn't fit to be president. She was barely fit to be vice president, mind you. But we all know that Joe Biden's presidency will probably go down in history as the worst in American history, and that's even dwarfing people like James Buchanan, who was definitely one of the worst presidents we ever had. But, yeah, I admit that I was wrong in judging how Trump was going to be. But that's it. I'm admitting my faults. I'm admitting I'm a dumbass. I'm admitting that I was wrong. I misjudged the situation. And that I am still adamant that the other choice would have been worse. It was the best, I guess you could say the best of the two evils. I'm not sure. There's another way to say that, but I keep forgetting what the saying is. But Trump was better of the two of them. We had terrible choices in 2024. Everyone knows that. That's the reason why the two-party system isn't working anymore. But Kamala was just not the best choice. And tying back to the Tim Walz thing, he had that debate with J.D. Vance, which I think is still the best vice presidential debate full time. The way J.D. absolutely demolished his ass in the debate was pretty funny. But yeah, just The way Tim Walz has handled the whole thing has made me very skeptical. It's made me very disappointed in the leadership of the Democratic Party. That's one of the reasons why I'm never joining the Democratic Party again. And I'm not joining the Republican Party either, even though I might be running as a Republican in order to actually get somewhere in my political career. That's unfortunately I can't be running as a libertarian because we don't really have that much influence over state politics right now. Even though a lot of people do um, identify as libertarian in New Hampshire. Like New Hampshire is like one of the most libertarian states in the country, probably the most libertarian because the state motto literally "live free or die," and we were one of the first states to rebel. You know, the free state movement's based out of here. If you can't tell, I'm very proud of New Hampshire. The Grant State is the best. So, can we really trust a government that can't even follow the Constitution? Can can we trust a government that violates the privacy of millions of Americans, millions of its own citizens, in the sake in this for the sake of national security, for the sake of catching terrorists before they act, when the government might have been able to prevent the largest terrorist attack in history from happening? So what's more important to you? Your data and privacy, or catching some guy from Syria who might not even be planning anything at all? It could be a dead end. It could be a dud. Like, tracking conversations, it leads at ends where potential suspects are innocent, but not before raids ruin livelihoods and destroy individual freedom. People have lost their lives to swatting. They've lost their lives to wrongful raids. There's that one. What's it? Ruby Ridge. Ruby Ridge was one. One of the most infamous government incidents of all time. Bunch of people from the Fed showed up. It's actually the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I think it's the agency. Can't remember exactly what they're called. But yeah, the ATF, they showed up. Basically, guns blazing. They shot the guy. I think they shot his dog. They shot his son. They shot his wife. And they shot him. They killed the whole family. And I can't even remember what was over. That's how stupid this was. They killed someone. And everyone he loved over some petty difference. He probably didn't pay his taxes or something like that. Maybe. Again, I'm not. Actually, you know what? Let's look it up. Give me a sec. Why did Ruby, it's hard to type with one hand, Ridge happen? Yeah, my laptop's all charged now. I'm gonna unplug it. All right, let's see. Gemini's doing its little work. Ruby Ridge is one of the most significant flashpoints in modern American history, serving as a primary catalyst for the growth of the anti-government and militia movements of the 1990s. It wasn't a single event, but a comedy of errors. It sounds like the Vine comedy from Dante. Fueled by mutual suspicion, a botched undercover operation, and a radical escalation of force by, you guessed it, federal agencies. So, the catalyst was Randy Weaver, a former Green Beret who moved his family to a remote cabin on Ruby Ridge in Idaho to live as survivalists. So Weaver held white supremacist and anti-government views and attended several meetings of the Aryan nations, who, if you didn't know, they are the name says Aryan, they're neo-Nazis. The Trap, an ATF informant, befriended Weaver and pressured him into selling two sawed-off shotguns. So yeah, it was a sting, an undercover sting. The legal trap was the shotguns were a fraction of an inch shorter than the legal limit. The ATF offered to drop the charges if Weaver would become an informant on the Aryan nations. Weaver obviously refused. The paperwork error. Weaver was indicted, but the court clerk sent him a summons with the wrong date. When Weaver didn't show up, thinking the trial was a month later, a bench warrant was issued for his arrest. This is crazy. The guy was killed because of a stupid misunderstanding. The 18-month standoff, Weaver, convinced the government was out to kill him, retreated to his cabin and refused to surrender. For a year and a half, the U.S. Marshal Service conducted secret surveillance on the property using high-tech cameras and hidden teams. This ties into FISA, which is the main topic for today's stream. The firefight at the Y. The situation turned lethal when 6 marshals in camouflage and ghillie suits, don't know if I said that right, encountered Weaver's 14-year-old son Sammy, their dog Striker, and a family friend Kevin Harris in the woods. Okay, so I misremembered the details. I don't think his wife was killed. But his friend Kevin Harris was. The marshal shot the dog. Poor old Yeller. Sammy Weaver fired back and was killed while running toward the house, and Marshal William Dean was killed in the exchange. The siege and rules of engagement. The FBI's hostage rescue team (HRT) was called in. They implemented a controversial and an unprecedented change to their rules of engagement, which is any armed adult male observed in the vicinity of the Weaver cabin could and should be the subject of deadly force. Normally, only agents can fire if they face an imminent threat. This new shoot-on-sight order led to the tragedy the next day. So, as you can see, weaponization of federal forces led to the death of a man whose only crime was selling 2 slightly off-sawed shotguns and attending the nation of white supremacists. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't, I think he did all of his taxes right. His only crime was missing a court date. And this happened as a result of that. Oh, wait, nope, never mind. Nope, sorry. No, it was his daughter. Okay. Let me continue reading before you guys get any more confused. In me too. As Randy Weaver, Kevin Harris, and Weaver's daughter ran towards the cabin, FBI sniper Lon Horichi, I probably butchered that, opened fire. He wounded Randy Weaver. As the group scrambled through the front door, Horichi fired a second shot intended for Harris. The bullet passed through the door's glass and struck Vicky Weaver in the head while she was holding her 10-month-old baby. She died instantly. It's sad. So the siege ended after 11 days through the mediation of Bo Gritz. This legal and cultural fallout was massive. The reasons given: legal vindicated. Randy Weaver was acquitted of almost all charges except for the original failure to appear, which is still stupid. They changed the court date, so he was innocent anyway. Kevin Harris was acquitted of murder. Government censure. A Senate subcommittee later investigated the incident, leading to a massive overhaul of federal rules of engagement and a $3.1 million settlement paid to the Weaver family. And the militia spark. Ruby Ridge, followed shortly by the Waco siege. You know what? I'm going to type that in next. Became proof to many libertarians and right-wing groups that the federal government had become a tyrannical force willing to kill its own citizens over minor paperwork issues, which is still very much relevant to today. And this is where we get involved. The libertarian take. Ruby Ridge is often cited as the ultimate example of government overreach, where a minor regulatory infraction, the length of the shotgun barrel, was escalated into a military-style siege that killed a mother and a child on their own property. And don't forget the dog. The dog was definitely a casualty too. Absolutely included dog. Sorry, it's just asking me a question now. And what about Waco? Should make a movie of this. Waco is the number one thing I think of when I think of a federal overreach. Personally, people cite Ruby Ridge, but I just immediately think of the Waco siege. And here it is. Even Google admits it. If Ruby Ridge is a spark, Waco is the explosion. It remains the deadliest and most controversial standoff in American law enforcement history, lasting 51 days and ending in a televised inferno that claimed 76 lives. The target: the Branch Davidians, The group was a splinter sect of Seventh-day Adventists led by David Koresh. The guy was an absolute nut job. Let's get that out of the way right now. He's completely insane. He's a cultist. They're all cultists. They lived communally at the Mount Carmel Center near Waco, Texas. The allegations, the ATF, where's the cursor? Here it is. The ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, began investigating the group for the illegal manufacturing of machine guns and explosive devices. Where have we seen that before? It's almost like this didn't result in another siege a couple years prior. There were also disturbing reports of child sexual abuse and, of course, taking multiple spiritual wives, some as young as 12. Again, disgusting. I am not defending a Branch Davidians at all. These people were basically the spawn of Satan. I hope David Koresh burns in hell for his crimes. And it was obviously a word I can't say on YouTube because of site regulations. Again, more regulations. There you go. I gotta stop saying that probably sounds weird. The failed raid. The ATF attempted a dynamic lightning raid to serve search and arrest warrants. They arrived in cattle trailers and attempted to storm the building. So the firefight was a massive gun battle that erupted. To this day, both sides dispute who fired first. So it's a kind of shot heard around the world. Excuse me. 4 ATF agents and 6 Davidians were killed. The failure turned into a simple... Let me say that again. The failure turned a simple warrant service into a massive military-style siege led by the FBI. Again, why do we trust the feds with anything? 51-day psychological war. To have psychological effects on me too. I can't even speak right now. The FBI surrounded the compound with tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles. Again, this is because of firearms and mispaperworkness. I guess is the right word term. I don't know. I just made that up. They utilized hostage negotiation tactics alongside tactical pressure, which often contradicted each other. Psychological operations. To force the Davidians out, the FBI blasted the compound with high decibel sounds. Dying rabbits, Tibetan chants, Nancy Sinatra, oh my god. Years! Oh, that must all be awful, Nancy Sinatra. And kept floodlights on 24/7 to prevent sleep. If they really wanted those people to leave, they won't just blast Taylor Swift. Just saying. The hardline. Internal rifts developed between FBI negotiators who wanted to talk Koresh out and tactical commanders who viewed the Davidians. Again, these people were American citizens. Of course, there is such thing as domestic terrorism, but again, dude, this is over weapons not being registered on time. So, yeah. Authorized by Attorney General Janet Reno. Screw you, bitch. The FBI began a final push to end the standoff using CS gas, which is a fancy word of saying tear gas. They tear gassed the whole compound. Keep in mind, there are children in that compound. The children, who I'm pretty sure didn't sell guns to anybody. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Keep that in mind. The CAV, the combat engineer vehicles, began ramming holes into the walls of the building to inject the gas. And around noon, 3 separate fires broke out simultaneously. Within minutes, the wooden structure was engulfed. 76 Branch Davidians, including David Koresh and 25 children, unfortunately perished. Only 9 people escaped the flames. They are basically trapped there. They are trapped to die. Trapped to die over a misunderstanding. Okay, here we go. Who started the fire? This is the grassy knoll of the 1990s. We'll get into JFK later, okay? I think he was killed by the CIA. The government, which is the FBI, argues that the Davidians committed mass suicide by setting the blazes themselves. That they provided grainy FLIR forward-looking infrared. I can't just say that instead of the approximation. I don't know why. The footage, they claim, showed Davidians spreading accelerants. They argue that the FBI's tanks knocked over kerosene lanterns. This is what the survivors are saying. They're saying that the FBI tanks knocked over kerosene lanterns, or that the CS gas, which is flammable in high concentrations, was ignited by the pyrotechnic flakger grenades used by the FBI. So basically, yeah, that's why they escaped. The people who escaped are the people I believe. Just saying that right now. The FBI doesn't have a good standing in this situation, but again, we'll start over a misunderstanding. So Waco fundamentally changed how Americans view their political landscape. The militarization of the police. Libertarians point to Waco as the moment the line between police and military vanished, and we are correct in that. The use of tanks and chemical weapons against a religious community, even a fringe one, was seen as a terrifying precedent. Exactly 2 years to the day after the Waco fire, April 19th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh bombed the Murrah Federal Building in the Oklahoma City bombing. He explicitly stated that he did it as revenge for what the government did at Waco Ridge and Ruby Ridge and Waco. So there you go. The government is radicalizing Americans to commit acts of terrorism. The tragedy led to intense congregational hearings and a long-term shift in how federal agencies handled standoffs, moving towards containment and wait strategies rather than dynamic entry. So that happened. Okay, summary of that. Libertarian take. While many libertarians found David Cole's personal actions abhorrent, me included, definitely me included, that guy, I'm not going to say anymore. You already know my stance on that guy. They argued that the state's response to killing 24 children to save them from potential abuse was the ultimate expression of government cognitive dissonance and legal incompetence. I mean to laugh at that. It's just my friend. She uses coggy. It's like a standard term for cognitive dissonance. Even the government has it. See, there's that. So let's ask Google now. Were there any more examples of government overreach? Government overreach. I need to learn how to spell, dude. Since then, that's since then. Let's see what Google has to say. They'll probably have a lot to say, because there have been. Yeah, I can already see the response. And this is actually what I was getting into, too. Let's get into this. Since the era of Ruby Ridge and Waco, the debate over government overreach has shifted from remote cabin standoffs to the digital dragnets of the 21st century and high-profile domestic seizures. Here are the most significant ones. Here we go. Number uno, the Snowden revelations of 2013. If Waco was about physical force, the Edward Snowden leaks were about invisible force. Point blank, bingo, there we go. Snowden revealed that the NSA was using PRISM and other programs to collect the phone records and internet metadata of millions of Americans without individual warrants. This was viewed as a mass surveillance portrayal of the Fourth Amendment. Tying it to FISA, it proved that the government had moved from targeting specific suspects, like Horsher Weaver, to treating the entire population as a permanent target for data collection. The Bundy Standoff, 2014. This event is called the Ruby Ridge of the 21st century. The conflict. The Bureau of Land Management, BLM, not Black Lives Matter, different BLM, attempted to seize cattle belonging to rancher Cliven Bundy over a 20-year dispute regarding unpaid grazing fees on federal land. Again, unpaid, or unregistered leads to standoffs. Why? Why do you guys do this? Armed militia members from across the country flocked to Nevada to support Bundy. Unlike Waco, the government eventually backed down to avoid a bloodbath, citing public safety, although they probably want to avoid getting embarrassed like they did at Waco. They probably would want to avoid another fire that killed a bunch of children. I don't know if these people had children, though. What am I saying here? While the government eventually prosecuted those involved, including a later standoff at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in 2016. I think I remember that one. I think that was a bunch of Native Americans. I think they stormed something. Or maybe I'm remembering the Alcatraz one. Can't remember exactly what. The initial standoff highlighted deep resentment in the West over federal land ownership. I mean, the West has always been kind of wild. Wink, wink. But yeah. Good on them for standing up. I just scrolled past too far. Civil asset forfeiture, policing for profit. So this isn't one single event. I'm still going to read it anyway. But a systematic practice that libertarians argue is a daily form of overreach. As you can see, I tell Google, what's the libertarian take on this too much? Even though I'm a libertarian, so I already know what my take is. I just want to see if I can push it too far. Under civil asset forfeiture, police can seize cash, cars, or even homes if they suspect the property is involved in a crime, even if the owner is never charged or convicted. Between 2000 and 2019, states and the federal government seized at least $68.8 billion from citizens. And this is seen, obviously, as a violation of due process. Organizations like the Institute for Justice, again, argued that it creates a perverse incentive for police to prioritize profit over public safety. That makes sense. Oh my gosh, this next one's my favorite. Because I lived through this. Dude, this is one of the things that radicalized me as a person. One of the things that radicalized me to become center-right. For many libertarians, the pandemic represented the most widespread government overreach in history, and of course, we would be right. This included business lockdowns, school closures, and federal vaccine mandates for large employers, the latter of which was eventually struck down by the Supreme Court. Good on them. The core argument was about bodily autonomy and the right to earn a living. Libertarians argue that while the virus is a legitimate threat, which is China, the state did not have the authority to pause the Bill of Rights or decide which businesses were essential and which were not. Okay, the Operation Choke Point, 2013 to 2017. So, according to Google, this is a less visible but highly effective form of executive overreach. The Department of Justice pressured banks to cut off federal services to high-risk industries, including gun sellers, payday lenders, and tobacco shops, even though these businesses were operating legally and definitely legitimately. By using the banking system as a weapon, the government was able to choke out industries it disliked without passing a single new law. The common thread. Whether it's a tank in Texas or a metadata sweep in a data center, libertarians argue that the underlying issue is the same. The state expanding its power beyond the explicitly granted limits of the Constitution, usually in the name of safety or security. There you have it. I'm going to stop pushing Google now. It's probably getting tired of me anyway. So, we live in a society where the government, which has been entrusted to represent us, we the people, the American people, it has no problem throwing away civil rights for national security. This is how republics die, one power at a time. This is how republics turn into regimes. This is how republics turn into empires. This is kind of how Rome turned into an empire. So, on that happy note, let's all transition to something we all love and adore. Government spending! Yay! shaking the camera too much. Probably gave you guys all a seizure. I'm sorry about that. Don't you love it when you live in an over... I got to start following the notes. Don't you love an over-bloated government? Okay, enough of the sarcasm. Next item on the list, the DHS funding bill. This is a shutdown that has been going on for quite some time. But obviously no one's really paying attention to it, besides the TSA checkpoint thing. There's an issue regarding ICE and how they've been doing things. Christian Nolan was sacked, but that didn't impact anything. Congress just ended the longest shutdown in history of the Department of Homeland Security that lasted 75 days. Remember, time is irrelevant to the government unless it's time for the midterms or time for them to get reelected again. Then they get riled up. They passed a whopping $64.4 billion spending bill. DHS. Dear God, that's awful. Makes me shiver my pants. Instead of putting that money to use, like maybe giving some of it back to us hardworking Americans, they're putting it to bloated bureaucratic department, the DHS. I'm a fan of enforcement, but obviously there's a fine line between enforcing the law and oppression. That's what I said before about me supporting the police. I support the thin blue line. I don't support a thick blue line. Keep the blue line thin, please. And abolish the Federal Reserve, too, while you're at it. And the IRS. And the CIA. And the FBI. And the Department of Education. And the Department of Homeland Security. Abolish the whole fucking government. I don't care. We should abolish the DHS, though. Why? Just look at the long airport lines this year when TSS wasn't funded. State-run programs are often like this. You'll see this in our nations too, like the Scandinavian countries. They claim that they're all like the best example of social democratic socialism or democratic socialism, but it's not. It's a bureaucratic mess either way, because when the government is trusted to handle things, they don't handle things that well. If they aren't funded, people suffer. The government should have a hand in how this is run. Instead, we should privatize the airports and aviation security. Canada already has something like this, where the private firms handle airport security under government oversight. I mean, it doesn't watchful eye over them, but like it's a lot better than the bloated mess we're dealing with right now in the TSA and the DHS. And obviously, the Department of Homeland Security was created as a result of 9/11 and the Patriot Act. Which I think the Patriot Act did establish this. I can't remember which. Maybe as a part of it. Hold on, let me... Dude, I was born in 2005. I was born, like, at the beginning of Bush's second term. Did the Patriot Act establish the can't spell it. Jesus Christ. DHS. Well, you know what? Let me ask another question too. Why is this seen? Because I probably won't be able to explain it on my own. I have a tough time explaining things sometimes. So why is this seen as an expansion of government? What should I say? Government overreach, I guess. Yeah, I'll say overreach. Shut up, people. I'm recording this at 6. I used to record at like 8, but like now I'm at 10. I'm already past an hour mark too. I did it. I actually passed an hour mark. Okay, here we go. Alright, thanks Google. Well, they are often grouped together as the post 9/11 security state. The Patriot Act and the DHS were established by two different laws at different times. The Patriot Act was passed in October 2001. Oddly enough, that's also when the invasion of Afghanistan happened. But this focused on legal powers, surveillance, wiretapping, and data collection. And the Homeland Security Act, November 2002. This established the DHS as a cabinet-level department to reorganize the federal bureaucracy. So why is this seen as a government overreach? We argue that these two developments combined to create a surveillance industrial complex. It's like the military-industrial complex, but a lot more screwed up. That fundamentally altered the relationship between the citizen and the state. This sneak and peek warrants versus the Patriot Act. Before the Patriot Act, the Fourth Amendment generally required police to knock and announce their presence. Section 213 of the Act allowed for delay notice search warrants. See? Backdoor policies. They sneak past the Constitution. They claim they find loopholes. They do find loopholes. And they exploit that to oppress you even more. So agents can enter your home while you're away, search your belongings, and not tell you about it for weeks or months. So you can come home from a vacation in the Bahamas, and there's your home completely ransacked. Everything thrown about the place, and the government doesn't even need to tell you about it. So you can assume that, like, robbers broke in. While the only robbers was the state, the FBI, and the DHS. So while sold as a tool for terrorism, the vast majority of these warrants have been used in domestic drug cases, the war on drugs. And now for the centralization of power, this is the DHS. So the DHS was the largest reorganization of the U.S. government since 1947, merging 22 different agencies, like the TSA, ICE, and FEMA, into one. This created a massive unified enforcement arm with a multi-billion-dollar budget. So we argue that this centralization makes the government less accountable, as it's easier for mission creep to happen when border security, disaster relief, and domestic policing all report to the same office, to the same person, basically, the same secretary. National security letters. So the Patriot Act expanded the use of NSLs, essentially administrative subpoenas issued by the FBI without a judge's approval. So these letters can force businesses, banks, ISPs, libraries to turn over customer data. They often come with a gag order. We've seen this before. Trump had this happen to him, like during this presidency. Like, he was not allowed to say stuff. Meaning the business is legally forbidden telling the customer that they are being investigated. So to us, and should be to the American people, this is a secret law at its worst. Section 215, the library provision. So this allowed the government to demand any tangible thing, books, medical records, financial statements, as part of as a terrorism investigation. This is basically book burning, dude. This is literally book burning. It lowered the bar from probable cause to mere relevance. Critics argue that this turns every citizen into a permanent suspect, as almost any data point can be argued as relevant to broad investigation. So, the unified impact is when you combine the DHS's physical infrastructure, like checkpoints, scanners, and thousands of agents, with a Patriot Act's legal toolkit, warrantless data collection, and secret searches, you get what critics call a constitution-free zone. Welcome to 2021, everybody. 2026. Thank God we're not in 2021 anymore, because that was when Biden was elected. It's not even long grade, sorry. So yeah, this type of moderation has better results and is more fail-proof than the TSA, which is the privatization of the TSA, and the privatization of airport security. We should have that more often. You have like a bunch of private airlines. Why can't you just have them hire security to manage airport terminals? That would be so much easier than just having the government do everything. We should have the citizens be in charge of their own transportation, their own finances, their own everything. Because when you have the government in charge of that, you lose legitimacy. You lose a government that is legally required to be in your service. We have become slaves to the masters. We have been turned from the master into the slave. That's what the constitutions wanted us to be. They want us to be the masters of small federal government. That is what was actually what the United States was before a bunch of stuff happened. George Washington presided over of small government. Actually, he presided over a government that had no income tax. There were little to no taxes when George Washington was president. That must have been paradise. That was the most libertarian government in U.S. history. It was literally when we were founded. We were founded to be a libertarian nation. And unfortunately, George Washington did ruin that with the Whiskey Rebellion, which he basically just used the government to crack down on people revolting. I think it was just a bunch of riots. I don't think they're really trying to kill anybody. It was just a bunch of uprisings, but still, he used the government to crack down on them, and that's the reason why we're now where we are today. Ever since Washington, the government has like a big balloon. So many agencies and stuff added. So it wasn't all Abraham Lincoln. That too. He wasn't responsible for all of that. Just keep that in mind. So here it is. The DHS is essentially Frankenstein's monster, which is stitched together from 22 different agencies in the aftermath of 9/11. So government panic and fear led to massive waste and even more bureaucracy. So when you have fear, you have panic, and you have repercussions from that. When people are terrified, you do irrational things. I wish that's a way I could excuse government for what it's doing, but there's no excuse in government for doing this stuff. Screw the government. So I'm obviously going off the Google AI with this one, but according to Gemini, which pulls results from the internet, like Grok is my favorite AI to use. There's a lack of transparency with this funding bill, the funding bill for DHS as well. So if you remember correctly, there's a similar issue with the One Big Beautiful bill that was passed last year, the one that caused a schism between Trump and Elon Musk. The big fight between the two giants. They're literally BFFs. Like, if you were a foreigner and you're looking at American politics, like the relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, probably looked a little rainbowy. Yeah, I guess you could say, a little gay. So this is called unrestricted slush funds that billions of dollars are allocated under. So when billions are moved outside of the normal annual appropriations process, it short circuits the system of checks and balances, a system that we pride ourselves on, because it makes it impossible for taxpayers to know where their money is being spent on. And that was one of the big issues of the One Big Beautiful bill. I don't know why they can't just call it the One Big Wasteful bill. That's basically what it was. It's one of the things that kind of turned a lot of Americans away from Trump. I unfortunately endorsed a little bit of it because it did support the DHS, it did support ICE. And back then, ICE wasn't as crazy as they are now. They are just beginning to ramp up operations, but they're arresting illegal immigrants, they're deporting people. They're doing what Trump said he's gonna be doing. So that's what me as a MAGA guy kind of wanted. Yeah, I made clear I voted for Trump, which again, if you're new to the stream, I do not support Trump anymore. And I did my mistake. Do you know what else DHS promotes? That's right, surveillance. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, is just one of numerous examples of backdoor access domestic surveillance to target American citizens. So our police are also being militarized. Yeah. Our police right now are driving around in basically APCs, those big giant militarized tanks almost. They have access to semi-automatics. They have like visors, full-on body armor. SWAT looks like a paramilitary right now. And a lot of cities have this. New York has this, which makes sense because New York is a total hellhole. Apologies if you live there. I mean, you know disrespect. I'm just talking about the city's administration and their police. So, do we really want our police to resemble the police in Mexico? They're currently at war with their drug cartels, and it has cost them hundreds of thousands of lives, including even politicians like presidential candidates. It's weird how one president opens the border and lets millions of immigrants in, many of them undocumented, turning the whole turning the whole nation more authoritarian. Let me rephrase this. I keep screwing up. It's weird how one president opens the borders and lets millions of immigrants in, many of them undocumented, and then the next militarizes the police and turns the whole nation into something that kind of resembles a police state they would see in 1984. Actually, it does make perfect sense. This is the gradual wearing down society that the system wants. It's the divide and conquer strategy through different policies. So one president opened the borders for one and all, for civil liberties and inclusivity, while the other arrests Americans for national security and bombs other nations. For national security. And obviously for the oil. Don't forget the oil. We need the oil. We need it so bad. The oil makes the cars go, right? So obviously that was a parallel between Trump and Biden. Both were awful, but both are also very similar as to how they've been governing their administrations. Now they're governing the nation. Biden, as we all know, was a bumbling mess, but he was a Democrat. He was liberal in all of his policies. He's been criticized for his handling at the border. I was in high school while he was president. I was embarrassed every time he spoke. I was embarrassed every time he fell over. He looked like a loose egg out of a nursing home. He should have been in a nursing home. Why do we keep allowing, like, 80-year-old men to be the president? What happened to electing people like JFK? Oh, wait a minute, they get shot. That's right. Dude, does it hurt to just elect someone a little bit younger? Like Barack Obama, for example. I've criticized that guy in the past, but like, people do respect that guy. And it makes sense. He was the real deal back in the day. Obama was basically the left's version of Trump. He was the Democrats' version of Trump. He was the popular guy. He was basically the savior of the nation because when Obama was elected, Bush had left the nation in a recession. The whole 2007 to 2008 economic recession left the nation kind of broken. And the Wall Street was kind of fractured. Like the housing bubble popped. People couldn't afford homes. And it was awful. There's a lot of banks collapsing. And let's be honest, Obama did kind of he pulled us out of that. Debated, like, if his policies are actually good, because they kind of resembled FDR's more socialist policies, but I give credit where credit is due, and Obama definitely deserves the credit. He did bring America out of the recession. He brought us out of the Great Recession. That's what it's called, the Great Recession. And he did kind of repair the economy. Even if, again, the way he did it is hotly debated. But that being said, I have to cyberbully every politician. Obama is also called the deporter chief. Do you know why? It's because he deported a lot more people than Trump did. Granted, obviously ICE wasn't shooting people in the street during his administration. Trump. But, well, he did deport, I think it was, let's see. Let's ask the AI again. Huh? I love this AI. How many people did Obama deport? I had a friend. Her not her husband. Sorry, LG. Her cousin was deported under Obama. Here we go. Give it some time. Give it some time. It's thinking. All right. But yeah, the question of how many people Barack Obama has deported is one of the most debated topics in modern immigration policy, largely because the answer depends entirely on how you define a deportation. Okay, it's definitely define a deportation. Apparently, I thought that meant just kicking him out of the country, but I guess you can just deport them to hell too. Maybe. The Obama administration was famously labeled the deporter in chief by immigrant rights activists group. Sorry, whether he actually holds the record is a matter of administrative bookkeeping. All right, let's see how this is. All right, so to understand the numbers, you have to look at the difference between removals and returns. Returns. What the hell? This is like the sort of thing you see in like stores. What is this? What is immigration all of a sudden like retail now? Sorry, we can't take this immigrant anymore. We're talking about like store value. All right, that's going too far. All right, removals, formal deportations. This is a formal legal process. It carries a permanent mark on a person's record and legal penalties if they try to re-enter. Well, returns, which is a voluntary return, this is when someone is caught at the border and sent back immediately without a formal court order or permanent mark on their record. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Okay, so according to Google, formal removals under the Obama administration has been 3.1 million approximately. This is a record high for formal removals. While the total sent back is a whopping approximately 5.2 million. This includes both removals and returns. So a lot of numbers are controversial. The counting shifts. During the Obama years, the Department of Homeland Security changed how they reported numbers. Trying to hide their evidence. I see what you're doing here. I see you. I see what you're doing. You're trying to hide evidence. You're trying to make it so Trump looks like a bad guy. I see everything as a conspiracy, by the way. They began counting people caught at the border and processed through expedited removal as formal removals. In previous administrations like Bush or Clinton, these people were usually counted as returns. The result is, by moving border captures into the removal column, Obama's formal deportation numbers skyrocketed, even though the total number of people being sent back was actually lower than under Bill Clinton or George W. Bush. Still lower than Trump. I mean, still higher than Trump. I don't think Trump deported that many people. Who deported more people? Trump. Yeah, I'm gonna do them all. I'm gonna do them all. Watch me do them all. Trump, Obama, Daddy Bush, Bush Jr., Biden, although I'm pretty sure Biden's probably the lowest of them all, or saxophone Clinton. I don't know why I'm calling them nicknames. I just feel like it. Friday night, I should have fun. There we go. So Google actually proves this. Yeah. It's even playing into it now too. Wonders of AI, wonders of technology. If you want to know who the all-time champion of deportations is, the answer depends on whether you are counting formal legal banishments or total people physically sent back. Here's how the Big Six ranked across the three different counting methods. That's a weird way of saying that. All right, the formal removals category. The winner is, drumroll, Obama. This counts people who went through a legal process, were officially deported, and are barred from returning. I think I called it. Deporter in chief, anyway. Presidents in the modern era, post 2000, score higher here because the government shifted from handshakes at the border to formal court orders. That's a weird way of putting it, but okay. So in the 8 years of Obama, there are 3.1 million immigrants deported. Junior Bush, while he was serving, 2 million immigrants were deported. Joe Biden was 1.5 million as of mid 2024, projected to rival or exceed Obama. I don't think he deported anymore. Biden was on for letting him in. Alright, so... Oh my god. Joe Biden's actually number 3. I expect them to be lower than that. Although it did admit that, the policy did change, so there is that. But look at this. Donald Trump. 935,000 in just 4 years. That was his first term. We're not counting the second term. We're counting the first term. So saxophone Bill Clinton was 870,000. But again, this is 1990s, so policy is different. And obviously, Daddy Bush was 150,000. Again, 1990s. But this is also 1988 to 1992, so things are much more different in the 80s, I think, too. I don't think they had that big of a crisis back then with the border and immigration. So total people sent back category. Drumroll. The winner is... Drumroll. Clinton. Bill Clinton. So this counts everyone. Those formerly deported and those caught at the border and simply told to walk back. Called returns. In the 1990s, the border was a revolving door where millions were caught and sent back without a formal paper trail. Jesus Christ. Bill Clinton, in this category, deported 12.2 million immigrants. The all-time record holder, and I'm pretty sure it's going to stay that way because it's hard to see if anyone can even trump that. George Bush Jr. comes in second with 10.3 million. Barack Obama comes in third with 5.2 million. Biden, big shocker, 4.4 million. This includes Title 42 expulsions, which function like Clinton-era returns. Okay. Daddy Bush was 4.1 million. And Donald Trump was 2 million. But note, Trump's numbers were suppressed for 2 years by COVID-19 border closures. Okay, that makes sense. That does make sense. So the breakdown. Why are the numbers so weird? So Clinton is the volume king. Quite literally, too. Under Clinton, the border was incredibly active. The saxophone... It's literally playing into my nicknames. Maybe I should be president if I'm naming him like Saxophone Clinton. Anyway, bleh. The saxophone era saw massive amounts of voluntary returns, where people were caught, processed in minutes, and sent back across the line. It wasn't a legal deportation, but it was a physical removal. In my terms, it still counts. It's the same thing. Obama was the paperwork king. Obama earned the deporter-in-chief title because his administration started counting border captures as formal removals. He didn't necessarily catch more people than Clinton, but he made sure that they were legally banned for life, which spiked his official stats. Trump is the interior king. While Trump's total numbers are lower than Obama's, he focused more on interior enforcement, which means arresting people who had lived in the U.S. for years at job sites or at homes, rather than just catching people at the fence. And Biden is the surge king, which makes a lot of sense. So Biden has seen the highest number of border encounters in history because of a mix of Title 42, quick returns, and formal removals. His total removals were climbing at a faster rate than Obama. Somehow says R, but obviously Biden's been out for 2 years. This thing needs to be updated. Hello, Google. Time to update. So here we are. Time for the libertarian perspective. Time for the official Porcupine Zone perspective. So we argue that these numbers are all evidence of a failed, centrally planned system. Indeed, the Clinton era was a waste of resources on a revolving door. The Obama era was bureaucratic cruelty by turning everyone into a formal criminal, which he also did with Medicare, with the Obamacare, sorry. The Trump era was economic disruption by targeting long-term residents, and the Biden era is administrative chaos caused by lack of clear legal pathways, and Gemini doesn't say this, but caused by a president with dementia. There you go. Alright, so if you mean who physically forced the most people out of the country, it's Bill Clinton. If you mean who used the legal system to ban the most people, it's drumroll, it's not Trump. It's Barack Obama. Big shocker, right? Big shocker. Who shall see that? Who could have seen that coming, huh? Sorry, so that's out of the way. Got that out of our system, right? Okay. Back to the topic at hand. DHS. So shutdowns are being weaponized to scare Americans into accepting larger and larger spending bills without any reforms that are promoted by the snakes we elect into Congress. These king cobras, dude, they're abusing their seats, they're abusing their power. They sit there, they complain about how the other party's ruining everything, and they don't accomplish anything in the 2 years that they are supposed to serve. And now you have chaos like the TSA, that even though it's good that it's kind of functioning without a government, it's still, hurting innocent Americans. Like, Aunt Rose needs to get to from Miami to Los Angeles. Well, her flight's delayed because the government's having an episode. It's like the government has a big bipolar disorder. Seems like that's actually probably the best way to say it too. Every 4 years, it seems like our government just switches. You're a Democrat, and now you're a Republican. It's like in a blink of an eye. It seems like for history. We have reached levels of corruption that make us look comparable to nations like the Philippines, and it's quite sad. And even like third world nations, our government's being compared to them. Our government's starting to resemble even governments like Russia, which I admitted, I do respect Vladimir Putin. Like, he's one of the last kind of traditional values leaders. I know he's a dictator. He's absolutely a dictator, but his government, do you know why he stayed in power for so long? It's corruption. He assassinated people. He put people in jail. He weaponized the police. He weaponized the FSB, which is their version of the FBI. He's Russia into a surveillance state, where posting on social media will be arrested too. But they went further than that. They have now banned Facebook. They've banned YouTube. They've banned Instagram. They've banned all these sites. You can only go on government-approved sites now in Russia, unless you're using a VPN. But I think they're even cracking down on that too now. I read about this the other day, literally last night. Moscow created a censorship board. That's all. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They are shouting to the whole world, look at this. This is what we're doing. Isn't that what Biden tried to do too? Like, he is labeling a bunch of stuff as misinformation. And sites like the one I'm streaming on right now, YouTube, they labeled COVID, basically alternative information. They labeled it misinformation, and they banned channels because of it. They banned people like Alex Jones for spreading conspiracy theories. And thankfully, it seems like that era's over. But, dude, like, with the way the Trump administration is going right now, I'm kind of scared. We could be in for, like, a Trump version of Biden. And, like, thank God Biden went out before things got too far, but still, it's scary. So, people look to America as a shining beacon of democracy and freedom and liberty, and they see a mess that we're getting ourselves into. You come across the river, you come across the great big sea. America is like heaven compared to the tyranny you're under in, say, Syria or whatever. And you're seeing a government that can't even represent its own citizens. They'll focus more on immigrants than their own citizens. They'll focus more on their own needs than the citizens. You see what I'm saying? The government prioritizes itself, its own well-being over your well-being. They don't care about like how you're doing. They'll raise taxes for you. The town my parents live in, I went to a committee meeting the other night. They literally said we'll raise taxes because people don't seem to be prioritizing taxes. While there's already people struggling, they're struggling to make ends meet, and they're becoming basically wasteful, useless people, by the very people they elect into office. And that's the reason why I'm so pissed off right now. And that's the reason why I'm thinking of running. I am gonna run for the state house. So I'm tired of seeing all these different agencies, all these different people you elect into positions of power, abusing the power. They're supposed to represent you, and they don't anymore. And it's sad. Very sad. I was there, and I tried to bring up, dude, raising taxes is not a good idea. And no one listened to me. And when I tried to bring it up again, they told me they don't allow outside conversation. And then they promptly kicked me out like 5 minutes later. That's I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen of the town technically. My parents live there, and I'm about to live there too. I'm a citizen of that town. They kicked me out of a meeting because I'm a member of the public. It's disappointing, really disappointing. So the Statue of Liberty used to symbolize a land of opportunity to immigrants, legal immigrants, obviously, who were arriving from Europe to start a new life. You read about that, like the Roaring '20s. America was booming because of immigrants. Immigrants did build America. It's true. They migrated legally, they settled, they made a living, and they helped propel this nation to where it is now. They built the railroads. They built the roads. They built the very roads that you travel on your car in. They built the cars you travel in, too. There's people outside this country who make the very stuff that we import. But our infrastructure was built by immigrants trying to get a better life. That's what America is supposed to symbolize. Freedom. Freedom from oppression. Freedom from corruption. Freedom for everybody. Democracy over all. Isn't that the reason why we joined the world wars? To stop the Central Powers, to stop the Axis? Isn't that the reason why we topple Saddam Hussein? Is that the reason why we're going to war in Iran right now? Not really. You get what I'm saying? It's completely hypocritical that we are changing our nation's governments to be less authoritarian, while ours is becoming more authoritarian by the day. Now, the same opportunities that are being taken away from you in the name of your safety and security. National security. Like, when you give up your rights so you can feel safer at night, you aren't keeping the boogeyman away. You are welcoming him into your home. You are turning the government into the boogeyman. You are giving permission to the government to turn into your boogeyman. And the boogeyman, this boogeyman isn't playing nice. The enemy isn't out there. The enemy is in here. It's in this very nation. The enemy within is true. Because the enemy within is our government right now. It's turning into the very thing that we founded our nation to oppose. You don't have to be libertarian to recognize that. You don't have to be anything to recognize that. More people are becoming independent right now because they distrust both parties. And that's completely understandable. I can see where they're coming from. I'm going to be 21 this month. And as a 21-year-old, I can see the level of corruption we're at. I can see it clear as day. And, like, while I am politically active, like, other members of my family aren't really politically active, but I'm the most. We have to stand up. We have to. Hold protests. Instead of the whole No Kings protest, hold a no corruption protest. Protest the rising corruption in that government. Show it. Hold it proud. Hold your sign proud. Show your representatives they're supposed to represent you, not themselves. So, but there is a victory we did gain this week. All right, so a little bit of celebration. I don't have champagne. I do have a Gatorade bottle. I'm not gonna drink that at the moment. Actually, you know what? I am gonna drink it. Here's the victory. Yeah, it's good shit. Yeah, I mean, I actually almost choked on it, but hey, nice for victory, right? The Trump administration passed their proposal for fiscal year 2027, calling for 21% cuts to non-defense discretionary spending, including the agencies like the CDC and the DHS, Department of Health and Human Services. It's stupid how they keep turning all these things into initials. Just call it the same. Just call it the Department of Health and Human Services. I say as I'm reading my own notes. So I literally wrote this. So this is good because it guts unwanted bureaucratic bloat, which is a major thorn in our side. And the government shouldn't be telling you what to do with your own body. First of all, we already went through that with COVID, and that was a nightmare. Speaking of that, let's put Fauci in a how do you say his name? Fauci? I'm gonna say it's Fauci. Put that guy in a jail cell. Alright. Calm down. Calm down. No more celebrating. No more celebrating, okay? I'm sorry. That's because the Trump administration also issued several presidential determinations using the Defense Production Act to bypass regulations in forced energy production. This is what I don't like about him. He's going against everything he's elected to do. Literally everything he's elected to do. He promised a safer border. We're seeing what ICE is doing right now. He promised a stronger economy. Gas right now is $4. It costs like $40 to fill up my car. He promised no more wars. We're at war with Iran, and we're actually quickly approaching a 60-day deadline of that. So we'll see if there's a new development over the weekend. Maybe I could talk about that on Monday's stream. But for those of you who don't know, the Defense Production Act is a powerful Cold War era law that gives the president the authority to force private companies to prioritize government orders and expand the production of materials deemed essential for national security. So think of it as a break glass in emergency button for the White House. This obviously goes against the free market, as it puts the government in a position to command what it wants, and it makes sure that it is served before everyone else. And this essential planning and market interference, even if the goal is more energy. There should never be a planned economy in a capitalist society. We live in a capitalist society. We live in a society. But I firmly believe that the free market should never be interfered with. The government should butt out of it. We should have a small government. We should return society to what it was in 1783, when we gained independence with the Bill of Rights. And actually, that was a good system of government, too. We had basically a bunch of confederations. It's a confederation of states. They're basically acting as their own country. And there's a small, little, limited government, basically a little speck, advising the states on how to act. But that was unfortunately abolished. Since we still have a little bit more time, I've only been streaming for an hour and 30 minutes. Let's get into some history lessons. So we're talking about one of my favorite history subjects, Rome. Interestingly, even though Rome seems like an impressive empire, it didn't start with a secret police. In fact, Rome was actually founded initially as a kingdom, and then it banned the monarchy in favor of a republic with a democratically elected Senate. This worked for a while, but as all things go, the Senate grew corrupt and lazy, and more interested in all political power. Seems like a certain Senate right now, in a certain nation. This led to a conflict with Julius Caesar, that escalated into a civil war that, as we all know, resulted in Caesar winning and the Senate growing significantly weaker. The Caesar seized more power, which the Senate actually basically handed him to appease him. The paranoid Senate assassinated him, stabbed him, I think it was like 28 times or something like that. And this destroyed the Republic and led to Octavian, it was actually his adopted son, led to him becoming Emperor Augustus and taking over the nation as the first emperor and turning Rome into the Roman Empire that we remember it as today. So, history lesson. Let's get into this. Let's jump into this. Jump on the bandwagon, folks. My history glasses on. I don't have a white lab coat anywhere, so I can't be a teacher, I guess. I'll improvise. I'm your substitute, I guess. During the early days of the empire, especially under the emperors Tiberius and Domitian, Rome didn't have a formal FBI, if you will. Instead, they had they incentivized citizens to spy on each other through delatories. This sounds familiar. This is because it was actually similarly used by people like Nicolae Ceausescu, who ruled Romania until he went bye-bye on their national television, and Joseph Stalin, who ruled the Soviet Union, as you know. Although they obviously had much more powerful and brutal secret police systems helping them enact this. So if you reported someone for treason under the system, which could be as simple as complaining about the emperor's face on a coin, which makes sense because a lot of the emperors were ugly as shit. You were legally entitled to 1/4 of their estate if they were convicted. So, since I just called the emperor a bunch of shit, legally, I would be arrested for calling the emperor that word. Thank you, I live in America. But, unfortunately, Trump seems like he's turning into an emperor now. This led to a bounty hunter economy where opportunistic informants targeted wealthy senators. This basically erased the empire's aristocracy's ability to trust one another, and this led to the erasure of the Senate, all of its remaining power, because it did survive, but this basically abolished them. This made sure they are all arrested, and anyone who criticized the emperor was bye-byed. This led to the frumentari, who they were originally military officers placed in charge of protecting the grain supply. However, because their job required them to travel everywhere and talk to everyone, the empire seized on this opportunity, and they became a dreaded secret police force. They became so hated that Emperor Diocletian had to abolish them to prevent an uprising. Imagine that, huh? And he replaced them with the Agentes and Regus, who were originally couriers for the Imperial Postal Service. This contributed to the fall of Rome. The dissolution of public trust in the government. You see, when the government treats every citizen as a potential suspect and traitor, citizens stopped caring about defending the government that spent all of its time spying on them, allowing the Goths, not nice Czechs who hang out in cemeteries. They're a legitimate group in, I think they originated in Romania, and the Vandals, early access to the empire, easy access. The surveillance of trade and postal routes made doing business incredibly expensive and slow, and because everyone was terrified of being reported, the emperors were constantly lied to about the strength of these enemies and the state of their borders. This led to the fall of Rome. Of course, those other things too. I see immorality as kind of the final nail in the coffin of Rome. It was a whole bunch of things, and eerily enough, a lot of the issues that plagued Rome before she fell for good are plaguing America right now. We're facing basically our own crisis of the 3rd century. You know what? Let's look that up right now. What was the crisis of the 3rd century, and how is modern day America. Similar. Yeah, I meant to go. Probably wearing this thing out. Right. The crisis of the 3rd century was a 50-year period where the Roman Empire nearly disintegrated under the combined weight of civil war, foreign invasion, and economic collapse. It is often called the imperial crisis or the military anarchy. So, let's dive into this. The crisis was the perfect storm of 3 major failures. The succession crisis, after the assassination of Emperor Severus Alexander. There was a lot of assassination back in the day. The empire saw 26 different claimants to the throne in just 50 years. Most were barracks emperors, generals who were declared leaders by their troops, only being murdered by the next general a few months later. The economic death spiral that paid the ever-increasing demands of the military. Emperors began debasing the currency. They reduced the silver content in the denarius until it was essentially a copper coin with a thin silver wash. This led to hyperinflation, a breakdown in trade, and a return to the barter economy in many regions. And finally, the fragmentation. At its lowest point, the empire split into 3 pieces: the Gallic Empire, the west, the Pomeranian Empire, the east, and the Roman Empire, the middle. Parallels to modern America. So when people compare the two, they usually focus on these 5 areas: currency debasement and inflation. For Rome, emperors diluted the silver in coins to fund bread and circuses and the military. While America, we, libertarians, we argue that moving off the gold standard and the Federal Reserve, Federal Reserve, I hate saying that word, quantitative easing, printing money, is the modern version of debasing the currency. We point to the devaluing of the dollar, which has lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1913, which is the establishment of the 16th Amendment, as a slow motion version of Rome's hyperinflation, which is very much true. The barracks influence in military spending. For Rome, the military became the kingmaker. If the emperor didn't pay the legions enough, he was killed. This forced the state to prioritize military budget over everything else. You can probably see I'm going with this in America. The military-industrial complex. With a defense budget approaching $1 trillion, for comparison, Elon Musk might be the first trillionaire. Some argue the U.S. is caught in a Roman trap, where it must continuously fund a global military presence to maintain its status, even as its domestic infrastructure and debt levels worsen. Political polarization and instability. For Rome, the Senate became irrelevant and political disputes were settled with swords. The common good was replaced by factional loyalty. So America, well, we aren't at the assassinating emperor stage. Actually, yes, we are. Trump had like 3 assassinations in the past 2 years. Past 3 years. Yeah, past 2 years. Observers point to the collapse of institutional trust and extreme polarization. The shift towards executive orders to bypass a paralyzed Congress is seen as a modern echo of the Roman Senate losing its power to the emperor's decrees. Which makes sense. The bread and circus is the dependency. For Rome, to keep a restive, unemployed population from rioting, the state provided free grain and massive gladiatorial games. This created a massive fiscal burden. For America, I guess you could probably see where this is going as well. Some argue that modern entitlement programs and the distraction culture of social media and endless entertainment, like Hollywood, serve a similar purpose, pacifying a population that is increasingly disconnected from the productive economy. And finally, border issues and migration. For Rome, the empire struggled to integrate or repel massive waves of Germanic and Gothic tribes. It eventually began hiring these barbarians as mercenaries to fill in its own thin-out legions. It had to hire Goth baddies to fight the barbarians. Okay, stop. I'm done with the golf jokes, I swear. And for America, the ongoing struggle over border security and the debate over how to integrate millions of migrants is often compared to Rome's later years, where the distinction between citizen and foreigner became blurred and the state lost control over its boundaries. So the biggest counterargument is obviously technology and adaptability. Rome was a slow-moving agricultural society that couldn't innovate its way out of trouble. America, despite its flaws, remains the world's leader in technological innovation and has a much more resilient, diversified economy. Though we are kind of slowing down in that too. There's a lot of analysts are saying we're fast approaching a depression. Well, it might be the worst since the Great Depression. And obviously, the libertarian take, the comparison is a warning. This is what I'm trying to get at too. Rome didn't fall in a day. It rotted from the inside through debt, overextension, and the loss of the rule of law. So to a libertarian, to someone like me, crisis of the 21st century is a result of the U.S. government trying to be a global empire while abandoning the fiscal and legal constraints of its own constitution. See? You abandon the rules of the land. You abandon the very thing that you're standing for. The nation of democracy becomes irrelevant if the document providing that said liberty gets constrained, gets abolished, gets pushed aside for things like FISA, for things like the Patriot Act, for things like the Department of Homeland Security. Loopholes exist. The government likes to exploit these loopholes. I'll show you one more thing. How is the fall of Rome compared to current situation in America? Let's do this. You know what? I'm gonna have another question for this thing right after this too. It's be the Republic turning into the Empire thing. Okay. He keeps mentioning libertarians. Like, I think I convinced Google to just always give me a libertarian perspective on things. Alright, so most experts clarify that if America is Rome, we are likely in the late Republic phase, the era of Julius Caesar, rather than the final collapse of the 5th century. And that's actually what I agree with too. We do seem to be in that phase. Because when Julius Caesar was the emperor, he kind of centralized all power in his kind of department. The reason why the Senate killed him was because they wanted to prevent him from becoming a king. So hopefully we don't see something like that happen between the Congress and Trump. But you never know, because Democrats now are currently positioned to win the midterms. So anything, I guess, could happen. Alright, many parallels being drawn today. Constellation of executive power. For Rome, the Republic didn't vanish overnight. Augustus kept the Senate in the elections, but moved all emergency powers into the hands of a single office. While America, critics point to the steady expansion of executive orders and the use of the administrative state to bypass a deadlocked Congress. The argument is that while institutions like the Senate and the Constitution still exist, real power shifted to the presidency and unelected agencies. Bingo. Hit the nail on that one. Fiscal suicide and currency debasement. For Rome, to pay for the military and public welfare, emperors reduced the silver content in the denarius until it was worthless, leading to hyperinflation. For America, modern quantitative easing in the $34 trillion national debt. That's absolutely crazy. My favorite Congressman Massey, he's a representative for Kentucky. First day, he wore this tracker of the debt, and it's crazy. I think like when he first took office, it was like 14 trillion. It's now 34 trillion. That's like double, dude. That's over double. It's the digital version of clipping coins. They argue that We argued that a currency that loses 2 to 5% of its value every year is debasing the labor and savings of its citizens, just as Rome did, obviously. Alright. The military industrial trap. The imperial overstretch. For Rome, by the end, the Roman army was a state within a state. The empire spent so much on border defense and paying soldiers that hauled out the domestic economy. While America, with over 800 military bases in over 70 countries, the U.S. faces what historian Paul Kennedy calls imperial overstretch. The debate in 2026 is whether the U.S. can remain a nation while serving as a global empire without eventually going bankrupt. So this was obviously after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. We entered what historians now call Pax Americana, which is basically we're top dog and we're the sole superpower of a lot of things. It was kind of like, I guess, Rome with Carthage. Like, obviously their Cold War went hot like 3 times, but, Carthage lost in the end. They got annexed into Rome, and we kind of annexed Russia in a way. Like, we turned our communist nation into a capitalist nation because they obviously saw that communism, it's a failed ideology. Capitalism is so much better. And yeah. So wealth inequality and the functional oligarchy. In the late Republic, small farmers were driven out of businesses by massive slave-run estates, latifundia, owned by the elite. This created a permanent angry underclass in the cities for Rome. For America, observers point to the shrinking middle class and the functional oligarchy, where billionaires control the digital infrastructure, social media, space tech, defense contracts, much like Roman generals once controlled the grain supply and the legions. This is obviously like Elon Musk. It's like Mark Zuckerberg. I like calling him Mark Zuckerberg. It's funny. Yeah, we are being controlled by billionaires. Russia has obviously an oligarchy. They kind of sold that back like when Vladimir Putin became president. But yeah. And finally, polarization and the loss of civic virtue. For Rome, once the great enemy, Carthage, was defeated, Romans turned on each other. Political rivals began using violence like assassinations and riots instead of debate. While in America, the rise of political violence and the total breakdown of trust between the two major parties is seen as the rhymes of history. When people stop believing the system is fair, they stop trying to fix it, start trying to seize it. Okay, now let's do my question. What are similarities? I need a Florence type, dude. These between the transition. Of Rome to an empire and the current state of America. Alright, let's see what it says. Well, as long as I've ever streamed, I think. Alright, here we go. So we're off and look at the late Republic. Obviously, that's what the thing said before. And while we're obviously not a military dictatorship, the structural and social symptoms show striking similarities. It's like saying Sally sold seashells by the seashore. I can't even say that right. Hold on. Come on. Alright. Ugh. Keeps going too far. Alright, there we go. The erosion of norms and administrative rule. In Rome, the transition didn't happen by burning the Constitution. It happened by ignoring it until it became irrelevant. That's happening with America right now. So, in Rome, Augustus never called himself a king. He kept the Senate in the elections, but gathered all the actual power, commanded the army, and control over the treasury into his own office. He ruled through emergency powers that never expired. For America, this is obviously the rise of the administrative state. rather than Congress passing specific laws like they're supposed to. That's enshrined in the Constitution. They're supposed to pass this stuff. Vast powers shifted to unelected agencies, the alphabet soup like the EPA, ATF, or DHS, that create regulations with the force of rule law. Like the Roman Senate, modern Congress is often seen as theatrical, where real power lies in executive orders and agency mandates. Okay. Wealth concentration and the lupin proletariat. It's a mouthful. The economic shift in the late Republic destroyed the middle class, creating a volatile political environment. I can see where we're going with this one. For Rome, the wealthy elites used slave labor to create massive factory farms, latifundia, putting small-scale family farmers out of business. These displaced citizens flooded into Rome, becoming a permanent underclass dependent on state welfare, the bread and circuses. While America, the decline of manufacturing, the rise of automation has created a similar hollowed-out middle class. The concentration of wealth in a functional oligarchy, like big tech, finance, and defense, mirrors the Roman optimus. A small group of elites who control the majority of the nation's resources and political influence. I guess you can call them the deep state. Or the shadow. I call them the shadow. Like I said before. Here we go. The imperial overstretch and the military trap. A republic is designed for domestic governance. An empire is designed for expansion. Eventually, the two do clash. So Rome transitioned to an empire because it couldn't manage its massive territories through republican debate. The military became the most important institution, and the generals eventually realized they didn't have to listen to the politicians. Well, for America, with a defense budget nearing $1 trillion and bases on nearly every corner of the globe, the U.S. faces the Roman dilemma. The cost of maintaining a global empire eventually bankrupts the republic that created it. So we argue that a nation cannot maintain a free republic at home while acting as an interventionist empire abroad. With a lot of people like calling for military aid to Ukraine and a lot of military aid to Israel, this has never been more clear until now. Seems like. Alright, polarization and the death of civic virtue. Perhaps the most human similarity is the breakdown of social trust. For Rome, politics became a zero-sum game. Self-compromising factions like the populace, and the optimates, the traditionalists, began using the legal system as lawfare to lawfare their opponents. When the law failed, they turned to street violence. Well, America, the total breakdown of bipartisan cooperation in the view of the other side as an existential threat to the nation is a direct echo of the decades leading up to Julius Caesar. When the common good is replaced by tribal loyalty, the door opens for a strongman to step in and provide order, like Donald Trump. Currency debasement as a policy. For Rome, to pay for the welfare state and the massive military, emperors clipped the edges of coins or diluted silver content. For America, the move toward fiat currency and a massive expansion of the money supply, printing money, is viewed by economists as the digital equivalent of Roman debasement. It allows the government to spend more than it collects in taxes, but it slowly destroys the purchasing power of the citizens' savings. So the biggest difference is that Rome had no concept of a peaceful transfer of power once the transition began. It was almost always settled by the sword. Well, we obviously still possess a constitutional framework that allows for reform. So we're currently at a crossroads. We are seeing the imperial side of our government, surveillance, global military, the debt, fighting against the Republican side, individual rights, local control, fiscal restraint. So Rome serves as a map of what happens if the imperial side wins. That's enough Roman comparison. So yeah, here it is. The lesson that can be learned from Rome. You can keep a dictator in power for decades, but eventually it weakens your civilization so much that you can't even see the external world collapsing around you. And that 2 hours, that's actually reaching the end of the stream. So I go live every Monday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but I am mainly active on X under the same name of Zvalat. Zvalat. If you like what you see, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm recognize my channel, and it really helps push it out there, and it means I can make better content for you guys in the future. And with that, remember guys, quills up, stay free, become ungovernable, and I'll see you guys next time.